My name is Athena Caldwell, 32 years old, living and working in Chicago, where I hold the position of Vice President of Investments at a major financial firm. But no matter how far I climb in my career, no matter how many impressive figures line up behind my name in quarterly reports, in my father's eyes, Franklin Caldwell, I've always been the outsider. My family lives in Connecticut, in a Georgian-style mansion overlooking Silvermere Lake. Every time I return home, it feels like stepping into a museum. Everything polished, perfect, but so cold it chills your bones. My father built that world, a man who rose from nothing and created Caldwell and Rowe, a construction empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. To outsiders, he's a legend. To me, he's the shadow that quietly suffocates every chance I have to be myself. I'm the middle child of three siblings. My older brother, Lucas, is my father's blazing pride. He attended Wharton, then returned to manage project development at the family firm. He has the picture-perfect family, an impeccable resume, and a natural charisma that earns my father's approval with just a nod. My youngest sister, Daisy, is 5 years younger than me, beautiful, charming, and uniquely skilled at softening even my father's stern demeanor. She's not a business genius or an academic star, but she always manages to present herself just right. Adorable enough, obedient enough, safe enough to avoid his disapproval. And me? I'm the name he never mentions in speeches. I went to Northwestern and turned down an MBA offer from Yale, his alma mater, because I refused to live in his shadow any longer. That decision, according to him, was an unforgivable betrayal. I once overheard him tell a friend at a New Year's party, "She always has to do things her own way, like the world owes her something." Not once has he asked what I do, not once has he inquired about the work I love or the milestones I've achieved. Even when I helped my firm secure a contract worth over $90 million with a major energy corporation, in his eyes I was just the stubborn girl, unwilling to follow the straight path that's already been laid. One time, I sent him a Forbes interview I was featured in. He called me back just to say, "That article talks a lot about you. I expected a mention of the family. Do you think I work for myself or for you?" I replied, "If you ever thought of your family, I wouldn't be this disappointed." I tried everything to make him proud, sent him my quarterly investment performance rankings, bought him a plane ticket to attend a conference where I was the keynote speaker. He didn't come, he didn't even reply. There were nights I'd sit alone in my high-rise condo in the Gold Coast, staring down at the twinkling city, wondering, what did I do wrong? What am I still missing to be acknowledged as his daughter? But my father has never said, "I'm proud of you," not once, even though I've made no major mistakes, never been in any scandals, never wasted money like the children of his friends. In his eyes, I remain a blurred silhouette, unworthy of mention at the family table. That's why every Caldwell family reunion makes me sick to my stomach. This year's gathering, held on a Saturday evening at the Lakeside Estate, was no different. I had decided not to go, but part of me, the foolish part still wishing for a miracle, booked the ticket and went anyway. Even after reaching positions most people spend a lifetime dreaming of, I've always been the child my father deliberately overlooked. At 29, I was promoted to lead the investment strategy team at one of America's top financial firms. Within 8 months, our group exceeded targets by 31%, securing 3 major contracts on the West Coast. The following month, I received a 6-figure bonus and decided to use part of it as a down payment on the condo I'd dreamed of since I was an intern, a small penthouse on the 31st floor overlooking Lake Michigan. I still remember that first moment standing in the empty unit, afternoon light pouring through the glass wall, bouncing off the oak floor like a giant mirror. I cried. Not because of triumph, but because I thought, maybe this time he'll be proud. Maybe now he'll finally see me. But he never mentioned it, not a word. Instead, the next week, I received an email titled, "Lucas nominated for Young Entrepreneur of the Year." The content was nothing but a link to an online article, with a picture of my brother shaking hands with the mayor of Hartford, captioned, "Grandson of Franklin Caldwell, rising star in green construction." Not a single congratulation sent my way. Lucas looks like someone born to be an icon, tall, blonde, a winning smile, a voice like a broadcaster, and the uncanny ability to make people believe he genuinely cares. He studied at Stanford, then became executive director of Caldwell's new branch in Austin. He's the son my father always called the future of our legacy. And me, according to my father, I chose a different path. Once, during dinner at home, he said in front of everyone, Lucas inherited the family's business instincts. Athena, she chose to sit behind a desk analyzing risk. That kind of job? Anyone can do it. My mother squeezed my hand under the table, as if to say, "Don't respond." Daisy looked at me, eyes full of quiet sadness. And Lucas? He simply smiled and nodded at our father, as if that statement were undeniable truth. I swallowed my half-chewed steak, the bitterness in my throat having nothing to do with seasoning. I didn't argue. I never did. Because I knew he didn't want feedback, just confirmation. But that night, driving back to the hotel, I turned on my phone and recorded a voice memo. Athena Caldwell, personal net worth $2.3 million, owner of one condo in Chicago, investment portfolio, 6 different holdings, 0 debt, no financial support from anyone. Performance, exceeded revenue benchmarks for 3 straight quarters, and never once mentioned in any of my father's speeches. I saved the file and named it What He'll Never See. Only one person in the family ever asked me, "Are you happy with what you do?" That was my grandmother. Grace Caldwell, the only woman in our lineage bold enough to drink bourbon instead of champagne at her own wedding. She used to call me Little Cactus because I bloomed where things weren't supposed to grow. She passed away 3 years ago, leaving me a small wooden box with a faintly carved inscription, "Follow your path, not theirs." Inside was an old photo. She was holding me, age 3, on the porch that winter. Behind us stood my father, hands in pockets, face turned away. I've looked at that photo hundreds of times, and each time the distance becomes clearer. The distance he never intended to close. And maybe I no longer want to close it either. I started to wonder if he never acknowledges me, then what happens when I make the world recognize me instead? I've begun the planning, and everything will start at this summer's family reunion, with a gift no one will see coming. I bought the silver gray Porsche Panamera at the end of April, when snow still fell in flurries across northern Illinois. Not because I loved cars, not even because I needed a flashy gesture. I bought it because, in a moment of weakness, I thought, maybe this time he'll see me differently. The car nearly drained my year-end bonus and a chunk of my investments I'd meant to hold until the market stabilized. But when I looked at the bold crest on the steering wheel, I imagined my father's eyes, Franklin Caldwell, finally landing where I stood. I arranged for the car to be delivered from the dealership in Chicago to New Haven, Connecticut, where the annual Caldwell and Rowe Founders Day celebration and family reunion would take place. A weekend-long event held at our family's historic estate by Lake Silvermere. I emailed my mother, saying I'd attend, with a single frosty note. "Tell Dad not to buy another car. I've already taken care of the gift." Friday night, I flew in. Saturday morning, I stood by the second-floor window, looking down at the granite driveway. The car had been parked right there, aligned with the fountain, standing out among the BMWs and Range Rovers belonging to cousins and uncles. My mother, who walked into the room, cashmere wrap in hand, her eyes worried. "Your father won't show it, but I think he'll appreciate it." I nodded, lips pressed tight. I no longer believed in the word appreciate. I just wanted to see him not turn away. By noon, the house was filled with guests. Greetings, clinking glasses, the echo of high heels on Persian-covered mahogany floors. I descended the stairs in a simple black dress, tailored to precision. Each step carried the weight of 10 years growing up in this house. I walked past the foyer, receiving a few lukewarm hugs from my mother's side of the family, a pat on the shoulder from Lucas, the brother who always made me feel like a stranger in my own bloodline. Nice car, he winked, half mocking, half amused. Still got the keys? I didn't reply, just smiled faintly. My father stood near the back veranda chatting with partners from California. As I approached, he glanced sideways for a blink, then turned away like I was waitstaff. No words, no handshake. My mother stepped up behind him, whispering something into his ear. I saw him pause for a beat. Then he turned to me. "Athena, you made it!" His tone flat as tap water. "That car outside. Whose is it?" I swallowed hard. "Mine, for you." He didn't react at first. Then came a smile, so faint no one could tell if it was real. "Ah, I see. So this is how you spend money?" The people nearby chuckled lightly. Some thought it was a joke. Some weren't sure. I knew exactly what it was. His way of smothering any effort, with one line dropped between breaths. Just enough to avoid criticism, but sharp enough to sting for days. He walked past me, saying as he went, "You should talk to your brother about long-term investments. Cars only depreciate." I stood there in the wide stone courtyard, where the manicured maples looked like paintings. The northeast chill in May sliced through fine fabric, cutting into my ribs like his words, cold, sharp, and merciless. Daisy came beside me, poured wine into the glass I was holding. "I know you did it hoping he'd notice." I didn't deny it. "But maybe he just doesn't have that software installed, sis." I laughed, a quiet, aching laugh. "Maybe. But if that's true, then it's time I uninstall him from my system too." That night, I sat alone in his former office, the same place I was once scolded at 13 for spilling coffee on a project map. I opened my wallet and stared at the silver-edged white envelope tucked inside, the one secret he couldn't control. Understood. Below is the English translation of your passage, strictly adapted into American English style and phrasing conventions, maintaining the original tone and formatting. Dinner began at 6:30, as the last light of day lingered on the surface of Lake Silvermere like a sheet of gold leaf. The estate's grand dining room had been arranged with the same precision as every year: ivory tablecloths, old sterling silver flatware polished to a gleam, amber-scented candles flickering between arrangements of white orchids placed along the long banquet table. I was seated near the far end, between a distant aunt and an executive assistant from Lucas's firm, someone I had just met that evening. Meanwhile, Lucas sat near our father at the head of the table, and Daisy was next to our mother, closer to the construction partners from Dallas. I wasn't surprised. The seating chart was always a map of how much or how little you mattered to Franklin Caldwell. I had long grown used to being stationed near the door, like a backup prop in a staged performance. When the main course arrived, peppercorn-crusted beef tenderloin with truffle mashed potatoes, my father stood up, lifting his glass of bourbon, the clink of crystal drawing the room into stillness. "Before we move on to dessert, I'd like to take a few moments to speak about something I've always held dear," he began, his voice low and deliberate. "Family is the strongest foundation in any journey, and I consider myself fortunate to have children who not only carry on our legacy, but elevate it." Every eye turned to him, and I felt my own breath start to slow. "Lucas," he said, turning to my brother, "you've proven your mettle with every project. Expanding the Texas division was a smart and strategic move." Lucas smiled and nodded as the room broke into polite applause. "Daisy, you didn't choose business, but the way you run your veterans charity is a source of pride. It's a clear reflection of social responsibility, something too often forgotten these days." My mother nodded gently, her eyes glowing as she looked at Daisy. I gripped my water glass, still waiting, still hoping. My father paused for a few seconds. His eyes swept the table before landing on me. The smile faded. "And of course, not everyone stays on course." The air seemed to suck itself out of the room. Some people, he continued, voice like a sharpened edge, think that by living in flashy cities and collecting a few glittery job titles, they've achieved something. But in truth, they're just chasing something they themselves don't understand. All eyes turned to me. Some looked down at their plates, pretending to slice meat. Others exchanged quiet glances. Lucas adjusted his tie slightly, like he'd been rehearsing for this moment all along. I'm proud of my two children, he raised his glass, hand trembling just slightly, and only two. No glass clink followed, just a silence so heavy it seemed to press down on every shoulder in the room. I didn't move. My skin tingled like it had been dipped in ice. The aunt to my left gently placed a hand on my shoulder, but I pulled away. I didn't want pity. I wanted the truth to be called what it was. Lucas leaned toward my father and said something that made him smirk, a tight-lipped grin, as if every word that came before had been something that needed to be said. I set down my knife and fork, quietly but firmly. Looks like dinner's complete, I said, standing, my voice strangely calm. Athena, my mother's voice trembled, eyes full of worry. It's all right, Mom, I just need some air, I said, turning before my voice could crack. As I walked out of the dining room, back straight, steps steady, I could feel the eyes that followed me. But I didn't turn back. I didn't need to see again what I already knew. This rejection wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate strike. Measured, rehearsed, and public. I stepped into the dark hallway, the light from the dining room stretching behind me like a beam from the past. In my pocket, the silver-edged white envelope lay silent, but now it was no longer a choice. It was a weapon. I don't remember how I made it back to the dining room. All I knew was that the moment I stepped through the door again, every eye turned toward me. Like they expected, I'd retreated quietly, like all the other times. But this time, I wasn't carrying patience. I stood at the head of the table, no more than 3 steps from my father. The crystal chandelier reflected off the brandy glass in front of him, glittering like a toast to his own victory. But there was no light left in my face. If I may, I said, my voice clear, I have something to share too. The room held its breath. My father leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow like he was watching some uninvited entertainment. Your choice. Just don't make it awkward for everyone. I gave a small smile, but my eyes didn't smile with me. I think after 32 years, if anyone feels awkward, it's not me. I reached into the pocket of my coat and pulled out a white envelope edged in silver. No one knew what it was, but the formality of it quieted even the whispers. I placed the envelope on the table right in front of Franklin Caldwell. Most of you know I work in Chicago, but maybe not all of you know I was just appointed Associate Director of East Coast Investment Strategy at Sable and Huntley. I'm the youngest person in the firm's 70-year history to hold that position. I looked around the table. A few quiet wows escaped. One of my uncles nodded slowly. I'm not saying this to be praised, I'm saying it to remind my father that sometimes being overlooked becomes the very fuel that drives someone farther than anyone expected. My father didn't respond. He slowly swirled his brandy, not looking at me. But there's something else you should know, and this time it's not about an achievement. I pointed at the envelope. This is a DNA test result. I took it after casually signing up for a genetic health screening. I paused. Across the table, Lucas sat upright, eyes wide. Daisy clutched our mother's hand. The sample came from a toothbrush you used once in the guest bathroom downstairs, I said calmly. I thought it would confirm our genetic match, but instead, it showed the opposite. No one said a word. Even the soft classical music in the background seemed to freeze. In other words, I met his eyes. I'm not biologically your daughter. And suddenly, all the pieces started to click. Painfully. Franklin's gaze never lifted from his drink. But I kept going, for the first time unafraid of the truth I used to bury. I've lived my whole life feeling like an outsider in this house, compared, dismissed, forgotten, and now I understand. Maybe you didn't hate me because I was Athena. Maybe you hated what I represented, something you could never forgive. I pushed the envelope toward him. Everyone watched as if they were witnessing a car crash. Impossible to stop, impossible to look away. I don't need you to confirm it. This paper already has. But I do need you to understand something. Your refusal to acknowledge me didn't erase me. It made me stronger, clearer, and more decisive about where I belong. I looked around the table, and my eyes landed on my mother. She looked back at me, lips trembling, eyes brimming with tears she didn't dare shed. Maybe you stayed silent, Mom, but I won't anymore. I turned and walked away from the table. Behind me, I heard someone whisper my name. Maybe Mom, maybe Daisy. But I didn't turn back. I stepped straight onto the veranda, where moonlight shimmered off the Porsche's silver hood, still damp with night dew. I clicked the key fob. The car unlocked with a soft beep. It was gentle, but it was final, like the quiet answer to a question I had carried for too long. I had chosen my own road, and this time, no one would shut the door on me again. I hadn't even pulled out of the gate when the front door burst open. My father's leather shoes struck the stone steps like a hammer to my chest. He charged across the driveway like fury personified, the opened envelope clenched in one hand, the crumpled DNA result twisted in his grip. His eyes were blazing, like I'd just set fire to the legacy he'd guarded all his life. "You think this means something?" he roared, waving the paper. I rolled down the window. That means I no longer need answers from someone who chose to deny me before I could even read. "You humiliated me in front of my partners, our entire family," he growled. "You're destroying yourself, Athena." "No, Dad. I'm freeing myself from a script you've directed for 32 years. I rolled the window back up and drove off, leaving him behind, clutching that paper like a live grenade with no time left to defuse. Less than 2 hours later, my phone exploded with calls and messages. The first was from Mom. "Mom, are you back at the hotel? I'm sorry, I couldn't stop him. Can you call me?" "Lucas, Athena, you're playing a very dangerous game. Don't think I don't see what you're trying to do. If you keep that car, I'll have no choice but to take action." "Daisy, I don't know what to say. But I'm here. If you need me, just text." I didn't respond. I sat in my hotel room in downtown New Haven, still wearing my coat, the glass of water in my hand, trembling slightly. Lucas again. "Don't fool yourself into thinking that paper gives you inheritance rights. Dad's calling the lawyers. You should return the asset given under false assumption before this escalates." I let out a dry laugh. Asset under false assumption? He meant the car I'd spent nearly a year's income to buy. For a man who denied my existence with every breath? If there was any false assumption, it was me, wasting a single dollar on false hope. That night, I got a call from Daisy. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Athena, Dad just shattered the baccarat glasses in his study. Mom locked herself in the reading room, won't speak to anyone. Lucas is pacing around the house, calling the firm's lawyers like he was the one betrayed." I leaned back in the chair. "Do you okay?" "I'm okay. I'm not surprised." Her voice cracked a little. "I've always seen how unfairly you were treated. No one said it, but we all knew. When you got that scholarship, Dad said, if it's not Yale, it's just a cheap fantasy. When you were invited to speak at the finance summit, he muttered, a woman just talks to look pretty. I stayed silent. Daisy had never said anything like this before. I never defended you. I was scared. I was weak. But tonight, when you stood up, when you put that envelope on the table, I've never seen anyone face him like that. I swallowed hard. You're not weak, Daisy. You stayed. I just got tired. A long pause. He didn't deny the DNA result, she whispered, but he said she might not carry my blood, but what I hate most is her defiance. I closed my eyes. So that was it. It wasn't the bloodline that broke him. It was the fact that I dared to step out of the orbit he built. Daisy, if you want to keep your distance, I get it. You don't have to take sides. But I want to. This time I want to. A moment later, a text from Mom appeared on my screen. Can you meet me tomorrow? Just the two of us? There's something I should have told you a long time ago. I read that line over and over. Years of being pushed aside, all those nights wondering why didn't she ever speak up, they came rushing back. I hadn't replied yet. But inside me, something had broken. Not pain, but the final shell I'd been holding on to. For a house that had already collapsed long ago. I met Mom the next morning, while dew still clung to the lawn outside the Caldwell estate. She greeted me at the back kitchen door. No makeup, no pearls, just a 60-year-old woman in a cream sweater, her eyes hollow from a sleepless night. We sat at the oak table by the window, the same spot where she usually sipped tea and flipped through interior design magazines, but today there was no tea. Just a manila folder already on the table, thin but heavy like a stone. She spoke first, her voice slightly trembling. You deserve to know. The truth is, before I met your father, well, Franklin, I was in love with someone else. I didn't interrupt, didn't blink, didn't let myself soften. His name was Daniel Morris, civil engineer, originally from Santa Barbara. I met him while I was attending Pratt. He came over from MIT for a joint exhibition. Her eyes softened with memory. He was smart, funny, kind, nothing like the boys from Connecticut. I thought he was the man I'd marry. Then why? Your grandfather, she said quickly, threatened to cut me off entirely if I kept seeing him. Don't disgrace this family over some broke engineer, he said. I nodded. History repeats itself, only the roles change. I broke it off with Daniel, not because I stopped loving him, but because I had no choice. 2 months later, I met Franklin Caldwell at a charity gala. Both families were pleased. A week after the engagement, I found out I was pregnant. With you. The kitchen fell into a weighted silence. I could hear the antique pendulum clock ticking by the fireplace. He knew. Right after the wedding, I confessed. At first, he stayed quiet for a long time. Then he said, "We'll raise her as our own, but you owe me a perfect family." I felt a chill climb from my heels to my neck, even though the room was filled with sunlight. And he kept his word. He maintained the image, but not the affection. He wouldn't allow himself to love a child that wasn't his by blood. She paused, eyes misting. I thought he'd change, but he never did. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt locked. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, softer than I meant. You let me grow up like a porcupine tossed into a peacock garden. I thought it was my fault. No, she whispered, placing her hand gently over mine. And I'll never forgive myself for that. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she reached for the folder and slid it toward me. Think this is everything I have? His old address, a graduation photo, and a letter I never sent. I opened the folder, skimming the contents. A black and white copy of a photo. Daniel standing beside the Golden Gate Bridge under construction, smiling, holding a hard hat. A handwritten letter, the ink smudged in places. Daniel, I hope you can forgive me. I chose the wrong path to save a life I was too scared to build. But if one day our daughter comes looking for you, please look at her the way you once looked at me. I closed the folder. My hands were trembling, but my eyes stayed dry. Not because I was strong, but because I had no tears left for things that would never change. Therapy. Is he still alive? Last I heard, he runs a structural consulting firm in Palo Alto. He has a family now, 3 kids. I nodded. Everything was becoming clearer, like a photograph slowly developing. Every childhood wound, every cold glance, every word I'd swallowed down now had an explanation. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that I was a living reminder of a mistake Franklin never forgave, even when he chose to silently accept it. I stood up. Mom grabbed my hand. This time, it didn't tremble. Athena, no matter what happens, you are still my daughter, and I won't stay silent anymore. I didn't say a word. I just squeezed her hand. For the first time in years, I felt her warmth, not because of the kitchen, but because she had nothing left to hide. 2 weeks after that conversation with my mother, I boarded a flight to San Francisco. I didn't tell anyone in the family. Not Lucas, not my father, not even Daisy. This trip was mine. No advice, no expectations, no one to sway my decisions anymore. I sat at a small cafe in Palo Alto, where the California sunlight filtered through orange tree leaves and lit up the pale wooden table. Across from me sat a man in his early 60s, graying hair, dark brown eyes, composed demeanor. His name was Daniel Morris. And he was my biological father. We had exchanged emails after I tracked down his company from the folder my mother gave me. His first reply was short but heavy with emotion. If you really are my daughter, then maybe I was wrong to never reach out. I'm sorry. And if you're willing, I'd like to meet. Just to listen. I read that line 5 times, then booked a flight that very night. Now he was sitting across from me, not offering excuses, not being defensive, just quietly present in a way I'd longed for from another man my whole life. When your mother disappeared from my life, he said softly, I thought that was the end, but I didn't know it was really the beginning of you. I said nothing. He continued, I'm married. I have 3 kids, 1 boy, 2 girls. They don't know about you, but if you'll allow me, I want to tell them, not to shock them, but to make things right. I'm not looking for another family, I replied honestly. I just needed to know who I was. And I think I've found that now. He nodded, not sad, not elated, just a father trying to understand his child, even if 30 years too late. We talked for nearly 2 hours about life, about work, about what he enjoyed, hiking, historical fiction, wooden model kits. Not once did he ask how much I earned or what my job title was. And because of that, I felt seen, without measurement, without proof. When I returned to Chicago, I had the Porsche delivered to Franklin Caldwell's office, along with a short note. I'm returning the car, because now I know I don't need to buy love from someone incapable of giving it. There was no reply from the company. But a few days later, Lucas's lawyer emailed saying, asset received, no further claims. I also removed all family photos from my apartment. In their place, I framed an old picture I'd found in the box from my mother, a shot of her holding me on snowy steps when I was 3. For the first time, that photo didn't feel like a painful relic. It felt like proof of a silent love that had been buried too long. My relationship with Mom and Daisy slowly changed over time. Less guarded, less distant. Daisy began visiting once a month, bringing homemade cookies and talking about her nonprofit plans. Mom called more often too, no longer sounding like she was reading off a Christmas card. She asked if I was sleeping well, if I'd eaten breakfast, and shared little stories from her garden. Not everything was perfect, but it was real, and I chose to hold on to that truth. I stayed at Sable and Huntley, but for the first time I turned down a promotion. I didn't need a higher title to fill a void that no longer existed. Instead, I used that time to study psychology, something I had quietly been curious about but never pursued. Every Wednesday night I attended a small class on healing from family trauma. No one there knew I was Athena Caldwell, once featured in Forbes, and that made it easier to breathe than ever before. I stopped looking back at Franklin, stopped following Caldwell and Roe News, stopped listening to whispers from extended relatives. I lived the rest of my life for myself, no longer defined by the Caldwell name, my adoptive father's legacy, or the numbers in my account. Just by one simple truth. I am Athena, the daughter of a mother who once feared, a father who came too late, and a self who is learning to forgive. And that is enough. Athena's story reminds us that validation, even from family, never defines our true worth. Sometimes the journey to uncover truth is more painful than we expect, but having the courage to face it is the first step toward freedom. In real life, many carry wounds from childhood or conditional relationships. But like Athena, we have the right to choose differently, to choose truth, choose healing, and live by our own values without anyone's permission. What do you think about Athena's decision? Would you be brave enough to do what she did? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more emotional family stories and powerful life lessons.